The ego is the system that runs your sense of self. It is made out of thought patterns, emotions, and behavioral loops, and the stories that try to hold it all together. Left unchecked, it creates endless existential searching, chronic disconnection, and the persistent sense that something is wrong. The goal of my videos is clarity, to see your identity and its contradictions for what they are, named precisely, to finally understand what it is that we're all running away from. When your intellect wakes up to how it actually works, then you either are absolutely terrified because your entire life has been a lie, or you are in denial about it and you don't want to actually recognize that, yeah, all thoughts are made up and they are not real. Now, this isn't just waking up to the intellect. Just because you recognize that your thoughts aren't you, it's kind of like the base layer. But if you go further and further up those layers, well, all of human language and all construction of mental models are also completely made up. This means that there's no way that any thought can lead you to the actual truth, because there will always be abstractions from the truth itself. So all the time that you're spending overthinking and overcaring and obsessing about, the words in your head, you are completely missing the point. And this kind of happens naturally. So it's not that you are doing it on purpose. I know that because we don't control our thoughts. They just kind of happen. And then we kind of want to control them and move them around. Well, the moment you notice how your mind constructs thoughts and you go into how illusionary words are, then you can untether yourself from your own intellect. And you start to see that, your true identity really is in an odd space that is hard to define. Now, the symptoms of noticing that this is the case is a cause for spiraling, because now your own sense of safety has been robbed away from you. There, a lot of people fall into, this sense that nothing really matters. And nihilism also relates to that, because a lot of people deconstruct language and then they are left with nihilism because they thought reality was made out of language. But reality is actually made out of sensations. Experiences is what make reality up. And just because you deconstruct language and the meaning-making system attached to the language you use, you're never actually getting rid of reality, because reality is precisely the thing that you cannot get rid of. And this is what the ego really wants to get rid of. It is reality. It wants itself to not be reality, but to be an external observer of it. And this is how the intellect is basically fueled by the ego, because the ego creates a reality model based off words and models and frameworks and intellectualizations. And then whenever you experience a feeling or an emotion, the intellect wraps it into something that is digestible for itself. And when you notice how all words are truly an illusion, not just something that you say because you are clever about it, not just because you've had this philosophical thought once, so you already know this, no, but because you are seeing through how the brain is constructing these intellectual frameworks and how they have no real ground to hold on to, then you awaken to, how constructed the mind really is. You get the first, opening that likely makes you very emotional, because it also implies that all the stuff you put so much suffering into, so much mental energy, is absolutely pointless. There's no real personal point to anything you're doing. Now, if we extend this realization, then you also can become very demotivated and depressed, because, hey, you built all this identity up in order to become somebody and to have meaning and point in your life. And then even this was fueled by the intellect. Even this was fueled by the ego. So instead of having the sense of, wow, what a beautiful realization, I was always free, the realization is, God damn it, there's actually just a trap door and I'm falling and there's no way out of this trap door. The intellect is a way to manage and protect yourself. And then it uses all philosophy and all intelligent thinking and all logic in order to protect itself from feeling deeper. Because you have the heart on one hand and the intellect on the other. what most men, and I would say that this is true for women too in modern society, is that everything is pushed towards logos. Everything needs to be logical and make sense. But everybody gets this feeling of being logical is like good, like people look at you as intelligent if you can present this way. But most people have never actually deconstructed their sense of ego enough in order to recognize that all the logic is just self-bias. You just biased and spewing your own bias, making sense of it logically, but it's all fueled because of some underlying emotion you're not connected with. And this is what happens in online culture everywhere. Like you see this in every online community ever. People attach themselves to their own intellectual frameworks. And it can just be why you like a movie or something. It doesn't really matter much. You're just using logic to justify an emotion. The moment you awaken, it doesn't work anymore. You have to experience and feel everything now because the mechanism to hold back the emotions, the experience just failed. It just broke apart. And this is the terrifying nature about all of this psychological work, because you think it would make you feel better, but for a while it likely makes you feel worse. And then you kind of want to crawl back to the safety of the logos. And when you then do this, you might end up in a psychiatric hospital, because it is exactly this clinging towards broken systems that makes people go, into psychosis or derealize. And to a certain extent, this is kind of normal, right? So it's not that something has gone wrong. It's kind of normal to, like when you're in a breakup phase with somebody, right? You're breaking up with somebody. The moment you lose them, you want them back more than you wanted them before. And in this phase, clinging a little bit to the past is natural. But if your mind goes, oh my God, I cannot accept that this is how things are actually like, I need to lie, deceive, or distract myself from this fact, then the awakening experience becomes like a profoundly sickening psychotic episode, or like some other mental health emergency. And nobody externally will be able to help you with this, because most people just will try to lose logos when logos is exactly the thing that has broken. You cannot be talked out with a logical system of something that is purely emotional, because it is everything that has been hidden by the intellect that then comes forth. Now, good news that when all of this is done and you find underneath the intellect something that is actually grounding and peaceful in its own silence, something that has connected you since the beginning of your life till now and can never cease because it is what you are, then there can be safe ground in experience, in feeling, and it doesn't need to be explained away with rationality. And from this center, a very intellectual, smart, rigorous thinking mind can emerge. Because it's not that words don't point to truth. They do point to truth. They're just not the same thing. And from there, you're also allowed to be contradictory sometimes. You can see that some things, or many things, are true at the same time. And you don't need to pick and choose with one thing or another, because there's harmony between all things, because all things are allowed to exist. And logic is very good at that, right? Logic is very good at justifying systems, and also very good at ignoring things that it doesn't want to justify. So for deeper heart awakenings, which means deeper feeling, the realization that your brain makes up almost everything you think of and tries to relate it all to a sense of self to prop up, once this is seen clearly, you can move to the heart. And from the heart, there's also then a deeper level, which is the nervous system component, and they all kind of relate together. I've made another video where I'm a bit more specific here. But what I want to focus on is that the only way this can work for you is if you can be kind to the intellect, even when it's unkind. Because when it stops working, or when you just generally, for most people who have some sort of arguments within themselves, they are quite harsh and you're quite mean. And if you're mean to yourself in thought, or if you're mean to your intellect, or just thinking about yourself, which at the end, I say the intellect, but most people identify with their voice in the head. So it might as well just be like you. So if you're arguing against yourself and fighting against yourself in this like logical manner, it is kindness that will stop the overthinking. It will be compassion with the part of you that has to endure all of this chatter. Because if you are antagonistic about it, and you might have noticed this on some like weird thought spiral, you're fueling the system. Because with conflict, the system survives. It needs contrast, and it needs contradiction, and it needs to have something to fight against. This is how endless overthinking argument spirals work in the head. Because you have always some enemy, either externally or internally, trying to mend or change, or you're trying to solve the past, or you're trying to solve this argument, you're trying to solve the painful nature of existence. And then you have fuel to argue in your head, and you have fuel to fight against something. And underneath overthinking is always the lack of acceptance. And with acceptance usually comes action. Because people think that acceptance means passivity, like you don't act, but you precisely need to accept in order to act. Because if not, you get stuck in whatever you are not accepting. You just stay where you are. So when you remove all of this mental chatter, what you're left with is a form of being that is free of thought and that sees reality clearly without a thought filter. Only then you can actually find yourself. Only then can you actually know what you want to do with your life. Then you see through all the garbage that has been accumulated through all these years that told you what you want, that told you what you needed to do, that told you who you are. And the good thing is that with losing this intellect's ego, with losing this, all of the stuff stops mattering. And you become sovereign and clear in your own body. And in your own head, for that matter. Because it's not that thoughts are the problem. It's the way you are over-focused with thoughts that are the problem. The way you over-identify with the intellect that is the problem. The moment this moves away, all of life opens up. And the intellect then becomes the sharpest weapon possible. Analyzing is all that I'm doing in these videos. So if you think I'm against like analysis or thought, then think again. Because I think there's huge value in actually thinking through problems and thinking through material reality and trying to understand how things work. And a lot of spirituality is to say, nah, this stuff doesn't matter. No, it matters immensely, because the way you speak and the way you think is the emotions that you have associated in yourself with the meanings of the words. That's why in my ego architecture audits, I focus on the meaning that a word has for a person. One client might use the same word to describe something, but they mean completely different things, because it is the emotional overlay that your body gives it. And you can not see it from your own perspective because you're so much living in it that there's immense value in having somebody else look at it. It just requires a lot of trust and to open your heart and let the intellect at the sidelines for a while. Or better said, to let the intellect be experienced by the heart. And the heart is really where happiness comes from. It's really there where you feel alive, where you feel joy, where you experience and like to be. It is the feminine energy, what some people say, that the intellect is the masculine and the heart is the feminine. The intellect is the powerful and the controlling and the taking and the building, and the female or the emotional, the heart, is about receiving, about acceptance, about compassion, about joy, about aliveness. And together they are really powerful. And it is only through the complete integration of both parts that you're going to find yourself in your most holistic possible state.